Should be topic number 2. Says, is this pre-colonialism? Is this what the men were doing? And why were the men or boys not punished too? Or is this a feminist hit piece? There's a lot of questions in that one prompt. Let me hold on a second. There's actually 2 videos for this one. So let me play the first one, and then we'll go into the second one.
Ja, we zijn op Lake Bouillon. Het verblijf op een van de 28 eilanden. En voor deze ochtend hebben we een heerlijke, relaxed boottrip. En dan gaan we kijken wat hier allemaal te zien en te doen is.
But the Punishment Island is the smallest island among the 29 islands that we have here, where our grandmoms and granddads used to punish girls that we are getting pregnant when they were not yet married. So whenever a girl gets pregnant before she was married, it was a big loss to the family. Because by then, whenever a family produces a girl child, they would think of a future big income of getting dowries, because by then they used to give a lot of cows and money as dowries. So whenever a girl gets pregnant, that was a big shame to the family. So the family had to also punish the girl seriously through beating the girl to the extent of killing the baby inside. And after proving that the fetus have died, the older brother and the father of the girl had to take a girl in a local canoe, and they drop her on the punishment island, such that the girl can starve and definitely die from the island. So a lot of girls died from the island because by then there were no these family planning methods, and girls were normal, they had boyfriends.
The house, yeah. You live here.
Yes, I'm by names of Ndamwesga Tyson, commonly known as Tyson Bunyonyi. This is my grandmom, Chitaraga Bigomauda, the one that was survived from the Punishment Island. And the Punishment Island is the smallest island among the 29 islands that we have here at Lake Bunyonyi, where our grandmoms and granddads used to punish girls that were getting pregnant before they were married. So this grandma of mine got pregnant when she was not yet married, and the family members had to beat her seriously, and they killed the baby inside. And after killing the baby inside, the old brother and the father of my grandmom took her in a canoe and they dropped her on the punishment island, so as she can starve and definitely die from the punishment island. But by that time, when they were dropping her there, they found there other 2 girls. So it became a group of 3 girls, and they stayed together for 2 nights. And during the day of the second night, they decided to count 1, 2, 3, and the third time to jump into the lake so as they can drown, because swimming lesson was not common here. So it was like a way of killing themselves. And as they counted 1, 2, the last time, my grandmom feared to jump into the lake, and the other 2 girls jumped, so they died, and she was left alone for the third night. And during the night of the third night, she was screaming because she was very hungry, and she knew that it was her last touches in the world. So as she was screaming, my grandpa was passing by with a canoe. He heard someone screaming on the punishment island. The man was very good, kindly. and he parked on the island. He found that this was the lady that was screaming on the island, so he had to help her to take her in a canoe, and he brought her here in this family, and they used the herbal medicine because the lady was, my grandmom by that time was very, very in a abnormal conditions. So they used the herbal medicines because here there were no these modernized medicine. They used the herbal medicines to treat my grandmom, and she recovered. And my grandpa decided to marry my grandmom. So now she's my grandmom, and I'm the grandson. That after the punishment island situation, when my grandpa brought her here, that the life starts again, and she started with a new life of visiting churches. That's why she's like waving and singing the kind of church song, so that she handed over all his life to God.
How many years? 20.
You are right.
Yeah?
Yeah.
20?
Yeah. That she still needs like 20 years in the future. Act as a tour guide here at Lake Bunyonyi. So whoever wants to explore or have some stories or visit my grandmom to have an eye-to-eye like conversation, you're highly welcome. Thank you.
So there's a second video. I'll play that now as well.
Lake Bunyonyi in the southwestern district of Kabale in Uganda is the third deepest lake in the world and second deepest in Africa. The lake has 29 islands, with the Company Island being the smallest. It is this island that is known as the Punishment Island, where unmarried girls who got pregnant were taken and left to die there.
To be rescued by the poor fishermen who could not afford the money for the dowries. Like they come like during the night, they check. If they find like 10 girls, they choose one who's like more beautiful than those girls. They marry for free, but you have to go away from the region. Because if they get with that girl, or they kill immediately.
93-year-old Jessica Rushanda, who got pregnant at the age of 18, is a survivor of this tradition.
I was brought by my brothers very early in the morning. They made sure I step out of the canoe onto the island before they left.
At the time of her arrival, there were 5 girls at the island who she joined to feed on aquatic plants and await their death. But how did Rushanda finally survive after spending a week at the death island?
For the week I spent on the island, we fed on wild fruits and weeds for survival. Of course, those who did not get picked up by men died of hunger. We would live with the dead bodies on the island, sometimes push them in water and rotate as we wait for men. My hopes of leaving the island were shattered when 2 girls were taken by sailors, leaving me behind. After waiting for days, a young man came to my rescue and asked me to live with him, leaving 5 girls behind. As I left, more girls were being brought to the island. I wasn't shy or ashamed when a man took me on. It was just my lucky day.
Shortly after settling with her husband, she gave birth to her firstborn Owen Byarhanga, who has since migrated to Chitagwenda in western Uganda.
My husband and I worked for other people and we were given food in turn. We later cultivated and grew our own food. When he passed on at 94, I worked very hard because being a widow doesn't kill you if you're wise. After my husband died, I started feeling strange pain in my spine and then slowly started losing my voice.
The now grandmother of 50 and great-grandmother of 20 children also weighed in between being killed and being dumped at the famous island.
Yes, indeed. Only trying to find a direct flight right now to that island. With that said, let's shake it up a bit. Oni, what say you to what you just saw on the prompt that says, is this pre-colonialism? Is this what the men were doing? And why were the men or boys not punished too? Or is this a feminist hit piece? What say you?
Sorry, hold on a second. Let me I'm trying to get this ticket right now, this plane ticket. Hold on a second. It was Uganda, right? All right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we should just investigate. Like, we got to use our passport, bros. You know, go investigate. No. What did you say?
Time to travel.
Exactly. It sounds like that's like a blue passport right now. All right. Is this pre-colonial? Look, that's what I was. See, that's what I. No, it was a little sad. I ain't gonna hold you, but this is what I mean when I tell people that culture comes from economics. You know, what we were talking about was an economics problem, right? Is this pre-colonialism? The reality of the world is that, like, there's going to be different cultures because there's different economies, and there's an economic trouble regards to excess women. You know, the Chinese, at some point when they felt like population was getting too high, they were like, you know, their government said, hey, look, you can only have one child type thing, right? They said, okay, well, if I had a girl, I'm going to kill her. You know what I'm saying? I'm just going to kill the girl. Or they might bind the little girl's feet if they did have a girl, because they're like, hey, you know, Chinese dudes like small feet type stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, I could believe this. You know, I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's false. I can believe this, and I can see that because even in Europe, you know, check out the Joke would talk about this, but in Europe, you would have like, yeah, girls were treated like shit too, because they were economically not as viable as men. And also, if you recall the whole idea of what kind of economy this is, this was a this was like a, no, I don't want to say agrarian per se, but they had dowries with large amount of cows type thing, right? There's so much to this, but yeah, I mean, it is what it is. As far as the question of why were the men not punished too? Because, like, why were they men? I mean, again, it's like the question being who goes down in value, right? If you are a father, right, and you're expecting a dowry, if you're trying to, basically, a lot of people are raising their girls to sell them, right? And if you can no longer sell her, you can no longer afford her. You know, and that's what I said about the, you know, if you read check out the Job's book where he discusses the two cradle theory. He says the reason why this white boy hated women, right, was because she was not economically viable. Now, the remedy for that, of course, is, or a remedy for that is agricultural economies, right, where women can, you know, contribute just as much as men, which is broad inside of Africa, but it obviously wasn't universal, right? And on the other hand, there is this sort of dowry system, and so yeah, the men don't lose value if they can still own property, right? But the women who don't, you know, that's an issue. So I don't want to say this is I mean, the feminists can use this. It's not a universal. They can use it, but it's realistically just how the real world is, in the sense of not everything is one way. There's no monoculture. There's no this, that, third. There is reality, and reality is people in you know, desperate times call for desperate measures. And it's sad, but that's the reality of desperate times, you know? And I think I'll go back to what Du Bois's aunt told him when he would criticize Booker T. Washington. She says, well, you never bore the whip. You know what I mean? We don't live in a situation where we go through extreme poverty and we're relying on selling our daughters, you know? I'm glad that, you know, she was rescued, and like Koku said, you know, maybe I'll go down to the island and get a couple of women myself, right? But but either way, like that's what you expect. This is the real world, you know? There's the imaginary world, there's the real world. And unfortunately, this is what it is.
Appreciate that, Only. Good kickoff to that topic. So Tan in the chat was telling us Zuliism, Africa was not a matriarch. I read this article this week about how Africa was at least matrilineal. It's interesting, and it raises a question. It's off topic right now, but you know, they were talking about how the Indians and the, who was it again, Persians, you know, used to come in and sleep with and marry these African women. I always wonder, why is that always the story? Why is it always the story these African women were sleeping with these foreign people groups? And how come we never hear about African men doing that to this other to these other people groups? It's just a fascinating thing for me, as Buana would say. Speaking of Buana, what say you to this?
Yes. So for me, I would like to answer the deeper question that's going on here for whoever created the prompt itself, because you know, we as a community, we don't perfect African romanticists. We don't romanticize Africa in a way where we believe that no misdealings and nefarious things took place in Africa. We are an African nationalist. We understand that there are some cultural practices that we did and we can should be gotten rid of. And I'm admit that, you know what I mean, with these kinds of, see, this particular, the reason why I say we in African romanticists is I understand that human beings gonna be evil and do evil kinds of things. My grandfather at a very early age. He was orphaned. He had no parents. And the men of his village, because he was an orphan, they plotted to murder him, throw him in a bonfire. So these kinds of things, I am not unfamiliar with the fact that we, as a community, we do things that I believe that we should get rid of, especially some of the traditions that we continue to practice. And it's interesting too, by the way, that something was said in this video. They gave her an abortion, which is, I don't know how they did that, because obviously they didn't have the Western doctor come in and give the African woman an abortion, but they was able to do it, and she still lived. And they heal her with herbal medicines. So what kind of science was they practicing? Witchcraft to heal the lady from bleeding to death? That's something to question, because these people had a tradition of some kind of medical science where they knew that they could have cured whatever ailment, you know, that you would have incurred due to the abortion they initially gave her. But that's interesting. But I would just say that we are not. We are nationalists, and yes, we should get rid of certain practices. Certain practices are outmoded. Certain traditions are outmoded. They need to be revisited. People say, "Who am I to question these things?" Well, you know, I can question it because I'm the equivalent of the African as anyone else, and I don't consider that to be right. And if you go produce an island exclusively for women, I would say you should produce an island where you go displace men and have them fend for themselves as well, you know, because that's really a ridiculousness. And looking at this from my position, and being conditioned and how I was conditioned, you know, I would consider this to be very, very unfair. And I would question them about it, the issues with them about it, the brothers who would have done this, you know, family members and all. You know, sometimes people say within the family, that's where the real hatreds are. But that's neither here nor there. I would say that this is an unfortunate event, but I would just say that this is not, we do not have exclusivity to these kinds of practices. These kinds of things occur all throughout humanity. And there are some things within our own community we do it, displace and get rid of. You know, we should stop practicing. But I'll stop there.
Buana, before you go, Nama X, shout out to Nama X for being here tonight too. He says, Buana, how is this a black practice when they're talking about marriage in churches? He says, this is not black, this is European. What say you to that?
So when I watched the initial video itself, I was getting the impression that this was a cultural thing that they did, you know, in creating this kind of island. But maybe it was a post-colonial thing. I don't have enough information in terms of what they was doing prior to, and in terms of whether this was a traditional practice or not. And if it was, because even if it wasn't, there are still African practices that goes on in Africa that is pre-colonial that I wouldn't continue to practice. In particular, there are human sacrifices. I was watching this video with this guy named General Buck Naked, and in terms of what his clan did in Liberia. So there are, like I say, even if it was something that was post-colonial, there are still things that we do pre-colonial that I would stop practicing and I would get rid of. I really would, you know. But that's my answer to that question.
I appreciate that, Buana. So we have a resident continental African on the panel. When you see this was in Uganda. When you see this turn, what are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, when you look at something, you have to ask yourself, why are they doing what they're doing? What are their reasons? Because it's easy to just get to the conclusion and say, oh, you know, these people just want to kill, you know, women or want to stab them and all that. But they said from the beginning that it was done because to discourage women from getting pregnant before marriage. So this was a punishment, first of all. So whether the punishment is fair or not, that's, you know, you can judge it from the outside, but that injunction was there because in most traditional African societies, having a child out of marriage was not good for you, not good for the family, and not good for the child. So punishment was very strict on women. It was very rare actually to hear of it. that someone got pregnant before they were married, because you remember marriage was a familial thing, and so everyone was involved. So if something like that happened, some people actually, outright, just they were punished more severely than this. At least this one, they were given a chance to go and maybe be rescued. So it was a death sentence, but not a guaranteed one. So that was that. But I know that in most societies, it was very, very, much taboo for a girl to get pregnant outside of marriage, because you brought shame and dishonor to yourself and to the entire family. So it's almost like you had to go and do severe penance for it to be accepted back into society.
Ten.
So yes.
Let me interject real quick. Nama X made this statement. He said, marriage is a black concept now has been delivered. When you say marriage, are you talking about the Christian concept of marriage, or are you talking something else? Or are you using marriage to describe something else?
No, I'm talking about marriage, two people coming together and having a family. I'm talking about marriage in the traditional African sense. So a traditional African marriage was not just, two individuals running off into the woods. It was the entire family. That's why even when they say they were taken to the islands, it was usually by their brothers, their family members who, had to bear the brunt of that dishonor. So marriage, I'm talking about marriage from a traditional African society, was the union of two family members through two individual people. So everyone in the community was involved in the marriage of two people. I'm not saying weddings. I'm not talking about, standing in front of a priest and all of that. I'm talking about everything from, the investigation to, to the tests of marriage, to the process of the elders being involved, to all of these things. So it was a communal affair. So as was this punishment, the punishment was a communal affair. Either the parents or the elders or the tribal judges would impose this punishment on those who are found to be guilty of it. So yeah.
All right, thank you, Tan.
I'm very curious what the punishment was for the males of the village, because they also are violating societal norms as well in terms of deflowering a girl prior to her being married. So I'm very curious to know what would have been their punishment.
And that's the problem with these kinds of, information. They're usually very one-sided. They have a conclusion they want to drive towards. And the basic conclusion of this was, oh, this is a terrible and primitive society, and look at what they're doing to these poor women. So I understand that the brand, but what should have been also included is, firstly, how did this, people don't just get pregnant by themselves. So who are these boys, or who are these men who impregnated the girls? What happened to them, and so on? My guess would be, and obviously I don't know about the particular tribe, but usually what would happen was the man's family would pay a price, or he would have to go undergo certain rituals and pay a certain penance as well. So it was usually on both parties. So I don't know in this case what happened. Their family probably paid a price, or did something to compensate. So yeah. Oh, Dutch. Oh, okay. Of course.
Well, not just that though. Oh, not just that, but one thing about pregnancy is that you don't know who the father is. Also, I do want to address that nobody said anything about abortions. They said that they beat the woman until the baby, she bled out, essentially. So they would beat her in such a way that it would force an abortion. But remember that in order for somebody to show signs of pregnancy, it would take at least, 3 months, 4 months after the sexual encounter. Not to say that the men weren't punished, but like you said, they didn't go over whether the men were punished or not. I did think it was kind of peculiar that the church was already in the community, because, if you believe the Christians, you would believe that this wouldn't happen. Sugar Happy said that's kind of an abortion. Yeah, I think somebody was talking about the technology involved in abortions. So like jumping down a flight of stairs is not like what people call an abortion per se. I mean, it's not like I think somebody was making the case. Oh no, I think it was Bono was making the case of how technologically advanced these people might have been to have abortions. Like I think maybe he was thinking that they were like taking the herbal remedies for abortions, but no, they were just doing the pretty much jumping down a flight of stairs thing, which I guess you could say is technically an abortion, but it's not the same as, oh, this is an advanced technology. It's really straightforward, you know. But yeah, I think that the church being present kind of does speak to some things, like essentially the church looking the other way, which is, you know, what you'd expect, I guess. But it is still surprising, and it's kind of sad that the lady, after all this, kind of gives herself to the church. But it's also not surprising that she gives herself to the church.
No, actually, I disagree. Oh, hold on, is that me? The usual position of the church would actually to save the lives of the women. Hence, this, you know, a piece such as this, when the British, you know, the famous story about that British lady who went to Nigeria and stopped the children, the twins from getting killed and so on, and so she rescued. Yeah, the British and white people love stories like this, where they go highlight some, you know, so-called barbaric aspect of or cruelty of Africans, and then they go in there and rescue the poor people, whether it's the children or you know, or the women. So no, the church would not agree to this. In fact, the church's position would have been to, you know, stop the practice and say, you know, we have come to civilize you, stop this barbaric practice. In terms of abortion, the way that people looked at things, the ultimate thing was, you know, children. Who is going to take care of the children? So hence why, you know, so many laws were made, including polygamy, including wife inheritance, and so on, so that the children would be taken care of. But that condition was that they would be taken care of in the, you know, in the confines of marriage. Marriage was the protection for the man, the woman, the children, and both families. So when you went against the society or rules and decided to have a child outside of marriage, you really left yourself open to, you know, to be outside of society. You left yourself vulnerable and without protection. So that is why, you know, they would send the girls to the island. So if a man picked her up, now she would be under his protection. So the man who, the way you got into trouble was with the man, and the only way to get out of it was, you know, was another man. In terms of abortion, you know, however they looked at it, they were looking at the fact that a child should be born within marriage. It was not so much, oh, you want to abort children or kill children. It was the fact that you have disobeyed the laws of the land, you have disobeyed the laws of marriage, and you have dishonored yourself and your family. So it was not so much, you know, oh, pro-abortion or this. It was more of, you know, children should be born within the marriage, and women should be punished for not adhering to those laws. I should be anybody. Yeah.
All right. So I don't know why Tanzan just interrupted me for that long thing, but I think
use tether bobbling.
I think I'm gonna put tether. I think I'm gonna put Tanzan's
you were talking for 3 hours already, Oni. So
I
she could interrupt.
I thought you left.
You were talking for
Why
a
is this guy
while,
still here?
Oni.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I'm going to put Tanzan's name on this plane ticket. She's going to Uganda. Forget it.
In the chat, Jose says nobody noticed the difference in the two stories about the same woman. So this brings us to Urzuli, who's back. Urzuli, did you notice that there was two different stories here?
Yeah, I noticed it was two different stories, but the reason why I researched this, and this is how crazy the thing is, I'm watching something on Netflix called they have a series of 10 folklore stories that came from Africa. So the first story is about this island. So I'm like, and in the story, they say the women are chained with weighted heavy metal balls, are chained to this tree, and then they are left there to die because they have committed that they got pregnant prior to that. And the director of that story is the director and the writer is a Black African director, but who produces that series is UNESCO. So then after that, I say, yo, let me research this story. And then I see these two stories. So in my mind, it's two things. Two things could be true. That actually happened, and then it's a hit piece. Because in my mind, I'm looking at it, it's like, okay, the girls get pregnant, but how come the boys are not punished? But Tan said something very important, that maybe they didn't show the boys being punished. Number one. Number two, this is probably, and I'm thinking about this, is like, are they trying to make African community accept single motherhood? Because now they're targeting the emotional part of every man and women. So they'd be like, oh, this is crazy. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? And then as it's ushering this new Western philosophy into Africa, that they bring this type of story in. All I'm saying myself is this: if this is true, and like they said, they didn't show the boys getting punished, to me, how do they punish the boys or the men that get those girls pregnant? And if that's what was the case, to keep women from having babies out of wedlock, which, okay, it's kind of harsh at the end of the day, but like Ten said, there's still people that rescued it. There were still simps with boats passing by doing this stuff. Well, simps with boats because they couldn't get women their own. And it says that in some of the thing. I was watching something, they said men that couldn't afford dowries will go by this island and steal the women. So a bunch of simps. And my only thing is if this is true, how fair was the punishment? I get it. That what if it's a young girl? Because I heard they wanted something to do. The youngest were 12, like 15. That's crazy. But again, I saw this. The reason when I researched it is because I saw this on Netflix as a 10-part series on African folklore. And in the first story was about that island, and the women were chained like slaves. And then who produced it? UNESCO. And again, a Black director and a Black writer wrote that. So that's what I'm saying. If it's propaganda, we need to control our image. And this is not a good thing to be put out there, because a lot of people are watching Netflix, and a lot of girls from the diaspora, from the Caribbean, are watching that and are going to be angry at males. So that's what I'm saying with that.
No, I agree, Azuli. I think that we do need to control our image. But the lady spoke for herself. Both of these ladies, if they're different ladies, they spoke for themselves. And none of them ever mentioned the fact that they was had a chain around their neck or anything like that. None of them. But as a solution to the issue, my question in my mind is, if these girls gotten pregnant, right? In the Bahamas, we have something called a shotgun wedding and things like that. You make that man marry that woman. You know what I mean? So I mean, if he sleep with her and he gets her pregnant, then that's his wife. Period. There's no. You would need the punishment if you enforce the rule that, hey, you get her pregnant, you are responsible for that child and that woman. Period. And
that sounds like you punishing the dude.
Hey, simps with boats. I like that one, by the way.
Absolutely. Anyone have any last thoughts on this prompt?
Simps with boats, for real. But at the end of the day, like what I wanted to say, Coco, I know you want to move on, is that, we need to invest in our own image through stories. I'm going to give another example before I did. I'm at work. Coco, we work at a college. This young lady is writing a paper on Africa. Nowadays they have some AI that could do your essays for you, right? Why the AI? She typed, because she's from another culture. She wrote the AI. She made the AI write the essay. You know what the AI wrote? Africans came to America through slavery, through indentured servant, and refugees. Which African got kidnapped? Which African left Africa to become a refugee and to come to America to be a slave? This is what's happening. And we're sitting here thinking this is a game. The AI wrote an essay saying Africans, during the Maafa, they came to America as refugees. Who leaves another country to become a slave in another country, bro? So this is what I'm saying. If you don't protect your image, if you don't invest in your image, if you don't create, you spend money. Sometimes imagination is more powerful than this science math we do in it. If Black people refuse to invest in creating their own stories. So this story right now, I saw on Netflix. I didn't finish watching the other stuff, which the other stories, but that number one story, that was, even if it's true, like I said, they had an image of 3 women tied down to slave. They put the shackle on their feet with heavy weighted metal balls. And which that's the question now. Where would they get those shackles? Where would Africans get those shackles if Africans was not using shackles to enslave people like that? So I'm just saying that it's a dangerous world out there. AI, the AI wrote an essay and said African people that from the Maafa came to America as refugees, indentured servants. So that's what I'm saying.
Last thing I'll say before we move on to the next prompt, that I've noticed for a long time. These folks that they're talking about, it could only be, it's possible that there's only like 200-300 of them. But the way they paint these pictures, you would think this is ubiquitous throughout Africa. This might just be some little corner of Africa. So yeah, I agree with you, but that image thing, these guys will make, one isolated situation with a handful of people, they'll make it seem like that's all Africa.
And the women, like I said, a lot of women, the women, especially the Black women who already have grudges against men in general and Black men, they're gonna eat this up and use that and throw it in our face because we ourselves are not countering that with movies or with stuff that says of our own image. So that's what I'm saying.
All right, SWB. Thank you for that. If there's no last thoughts, let's go to Shooter Breeze topic number 3.